Hey folks, welcome to another Securing S3 video. These videos have been inspired by a blog post by the team over at Fugue that listed off a number of things that you could do to secure your S3 buckets within your AWS accounts, and I kind of took that as inspiration to build out a series of videos to show you how you might do that using CloudFormation. If you've been following along, so far we have, if we go over to our console here and we look at what we've got, we've created our demo bucket and we've done a number of things to this bucket. We've enabled default encryption using a customer managed key. We've also blocked public access with a setting on the bucket here to protect it from public ACLs and things like that. And we've also put in a bucket policy that ensures all the communication to the bucket or the objects within this bucket is using a secure transport method, so SSL. In this video, we want to talk a little bit about a feature called VPC Endpoints. So VPC Endpoints, if you're not familiar, allows us to have private communications between resources that are deployed within a VPC and services that exist outside of the VPC. And you'll see here there's multiple types of VPC endpoints. We're particularly interested in the gateway endpoint because we're talking here about S3. The gateway endpoint provides us with the ability to communicate privately, let's say an EC2 instance deployed within our VPC, to an S3 bucket that is outside of that VPC, right? Because they're not VPC aware. And essentially what happens here with the gateway endpoint is we create a route target. We're going to update our route tables and say, if you're trying to get to the S3 service, go this way. Right? Now, there are other VPC endpoint services available. There's an interface endpoint, and there's the new gateway load balancer endpoint. If you are using services that aren't S3 or Dynamo and you want to have private communication, which I would highly recommend between something in a VPC and those services outside of the VPC, then definitely have a look at interface endpoints and potentially the new gateway load balancer endpoint if that's what you need in order to secure that communication. Okay. What we're going to do in this video is we are going to open up our editor and we're going to have a look at what we need to create to basically create those endpoints for S3 communication. Here's our VPC. Actually, let's go have a look quickly at the VPC in the management console to show you this. It is a really basic VPC. If I filter on the VPC on the subnets here, we won't really go any more in depth than this, but we've got this idea of 2 public subnets, 2 private subnets in different availability zones. And really what we're going to do is modify the route tables for these private subnets. Okay. So let's get at that right now. I think what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call it S3 endpoint. And we'll just borrow from this our first couple items, and we'll just say here a template to deploy. Okay. If you've seen any of my CloudFormation videos in the past, I tend to put parameters in here just as a placeholder. We'll come back to that, but we're gonna actually work mostly in the resources section here. So I'm just gonna call this endpoint 0, and we'll go over to the CloudFormation documentation, which I've got set up here, and we'll have a look at what we need. So the first thing is a policy document. This is a JSON document. It is supported by both interface and gateway endpoints, and in a gateway endpoint, what it's going to allow us to do is control the traffic, like what's able to flow through that endpoint to get to that S3 bucket. We aren't going to set this in this simple demo. We're going to let Amazon just assign a default policy to this, which would allow all traffic to flow through that. If we were doing this for a customer, we would definitely work with that customer to tie this down a little more. But for the purposes of the demo, we're going to leave that empty for today. Okay, just use the default one. We don't need private DNS enabled. That is for interface endpoints only. And this is the main piece of work here. Gateway endpoints, we need this route table ID. So let's set that up. and I'm going to just put a couple placeholders here. And if you've seen some of my other videos, this will be familiar. We need to use an intrinsic function to grab this, and I'll just come back and fill it out because I'm going to grab that little chunk of code from another template that we have. We don't need security group IDs. Those are only for interface endpoints. Remember, we've got an endpoint policy here that we're going to use. We do need to define the service name. So this is basically the service that we're going to associate to this endpoint. In our case, it's S3, and Amazon has a great example down here of an intrinsic function that we can use. And we're going to plunk that right in here. So let's have a look at this. This is basically the substitute intrinsic function, and then we've got a pseudo parameter. And why this is important is it allows us to take this single template and run it across multiple regions. If I'm going to run this in the CA Central region, so it will substitute the pseudo parameter with the region where CloudFormation is running this template. If I was to run this in another region, it substitutes it with the appropriate region. So why intrinsic functions and pseudo parameters are really important is it helps you build more flexible templates, right? We don't want to have individual templates for everything we're doing. Wherever possible, a single template should run across multiple accounts in multiple regions and support multiple environments. So that's why we're using the sub command with pseudo parameters. And then the other thing that we need is a VPC ID. Okay, so where are the route tables that we want to update? And we'll put it to do. What I'm gonna actually use here is the intrinsic function import value, which I should have in here, I think. I'm hoping. Oh, maybe it's in the KMS one. I know I have it here somewhere. Well laid plans, right? Oh, there it is. Look, I already highlighted and I just forgot where I was going. Okay, so let's close up these files again so it doesn't get too confusing. And what we're going to do is we're going to substitute this in. And yeah, let's go back to the VPC template. And I need the output values that we set here at the bottom. I want to modify the route tables right here. And I just called it private route table 0 and private route table 1. So we're just going to do that. And we want to put these in both of our route tables. So we'll do the same thing there. And then we also need the VPC ID. And I know in this case it's just that. So we have to pass this in. VPC stack is a type of a string. And you'll see what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in that value in the CI script. I think we have everything here. Let's just double check. Policy document, we said we're going to just let the default one get deployed for now. Private DNS we don't need. Route table IDs we've done. Security group IDs we don't need. We've got the service name. Subnets are for interface endpoints. Oh, VPC endpoint type. We might have to set that. I can't remember. The default is gateway, so that's fine. I think we should set it just so it's not confusing. Okay, and I think it's capital. Okay, so we'll do that. And then we've got our VPC ID. So I think we're good. Let's go over to our CI script and we'll just make a couple quick changes here. We'll borrow from this. And we'll change the name to endpoint validate. And what do we call this? S3 endpoint. And then we'll go down here and we'll do the same thing. And we'll say S3 endpoint deploy. And I'm going to call this stage 2. And we have to give it the VPC stack, which is demo VPC, and we'll use the environment variable, S3 endpoint, and then we need to pass in the parameter. So we'll say parameter, there we go, override VPC stack equals VPC stack. So that'll make sure that we pass in that information. And I think the rest of this is okay. So we have to add stage 2 at the top. Demo VPC environment. I just want to check to make sure. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Okay. So we'll go up here. Stage 2 is already there, so that's fine. And we're going to deploy this. look at our pipeline. Should go pretty quickly. Always takes longer when you're waiting, right? Clean that off of there. Oh, maybe it failed on us. No, okay, there we go. All right, I think I must have had a typo here somewhere. Let's go back and have a look. Because I'm not sure why that didn't show up. S3 endpoint. Oh, look what I did. I have the wrong stack name. So let's fix that. And then I'll show you if you do this, if you're working on a deployment and you basically generate a change set on another stack, I'll show you how to deal with that. This may have happened to me once or twice before. So we didn't overwrite. This is another really good demonstration of why change sets are really important. Here's our change set, and you can see it's telling us exactly what it's going to do. It's going to actually delete our bucket, it's going to remove the policy, and then it's going to add an endpoint. Obviously not what we want, so we're just going to delete the change set. We use change sets all the time, and that is a really great non-planned example of why they're really important. It gives you that moment. I often only half joke that it's kind of like the "Are you sure?" window pop-up to, well, ask you if you're really sure. So it's a great way to protect yourself from silly little errors like that. Okay, so that's good. Now if we refresh, there we go. Let's run this change set. Contains duplicate values. Bad cut and paste. Let's have a look. Yep. There we go. Easy fix, so we'll just delete this. And we'll give it a second because I want to make sure the pipeline's really quick for this one, so I want to make sure the pipeline doesn't error out just because we have a duplicate. That's fixed. Let's try it one more time. At least the pipeline isn't huge, so we can deploy these really quickly. Let's clean this up a bit and try that again to see if we've got the right definition this time. There we go. It helps when you don't make any typos. You can see we're done. What we've got now is in the private subnet, both private subnets, we've got a prefix. And a prefix is a way that you can use prefixes. I have another video on this, but Amazon uses prefixes to point to a service. So we're essentially saying this prefix list includes this service. And this shows for both of these endpoints, anything in those, or sorry, both of these subnets, for anything in these two subnets, if you're trying to communicate with the S3 service, use this VPC endpoint. Okay, here's our VPC endpoint. You can see what route tables it's associated with. There's the default policy that Amazon assigned to it because we didn't create anything here. You can always customize this later on. And we did not add tags because I don't think tags are supported in CloudFormation right now. It does not look like they are. So there you go. Another step in securing our communications with S3 buckets. So until the next video, get out there, build great things, and we'll see you soon.